How you guys doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, here on a Friday, November 15th, talking about the Week 11 that we had to start yesterday on a Thursday, a divisional matchup between the Eagles and the Washington Commanders. It was a great game, mostly tightly contested throughout the entire game except that second half and mainly the fourth quarter between the Eagles and the Commanders. We're going to talk about that and discuss what made the difference in that game, plus more on the Washington Commanders later on, talking about what do we make about this sort of lull that they've faced recently over the last couple games. Is it a sign to come, or can they overcome it to improve later on in the year? Plus the game picks, plus some more topics, again talking about Deion Sanders yet again. A lot more coming up on today's show, so make sure to stick around. But before we do get started on the first segment, I want to remind you guys, if you guys have any questions or comments or just anything you'd like to share on today's show, please don't hesitate to do so. We always like when you guys get involved and share whatever you guys have to say during these live shows. And now, if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that. Just use the Super Chat feature. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. In this way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel, and we always appreciate it when you guys are able to support our sports content and get involved with the show. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as conversational as always. It's always a big help when you guys are able to do that, so please don't hesitate. Get involved with the show. Let me know what you're thinking on any of the topics that we have on today's show and, just going forward. So that is that. And now we can talk about what we saw last night. And really just like last night, the Eagles and Saquon, it started off pretty rough, but towards the end, towards the fourth quarter, right, when Saquon goes crazy, has those two, touchdowns towards the end, it just reminded me of how, dumb and disgusted I was with the Giants for letting Saquon walk out that door. In the moment, I knew it was going to happen, going back months now, right? You knew it was going to happen the way things were trending, Hard Knocks and everything like that. And then for it to actually happen, you knew things like this were going to happen. And for still the Giants, again, to just let him walk because he's a running back, because he's on the other side of 25, it's asinine just what they did. And not only Saquon, but it's crazy to think how the Eagles and the Ravens, sort of took a chance on, older running backs and gave them more money than maybe a lot of teams would have. And they might have been looked at as a little bit just out of the ordinary. Like maybe they were paying too much for these guys because of their age, because they were running backs. And now, look at the two teams, right? Look at Baltimore and how good they are, and look at the Eagles as well. They have the two favorites for the Offensive Player of the Year, again, after an offseason where these moves were looked upon as a little bit, crazy or optimistic, and now it's just nuts. It's nuts how good the Eagles were already, and then just for them to get Saquon, it's a shame. It's a shame that the Giants, let this happen. And even the fans let them know about it, right? Showing their gratitude for what the Giants just gave them, just basically handed it to them to make them even better. But beside that, Saquon helped Philadelphia close the door last night on Washington as the Eagles won 26-18 to take a stronger grasp on the division lead. Now the Eagles sit at 8-2, while the Washington Commanders lose their second game in the last 5 days to drop to 7-4 and all the way down to the 7th seed in the playoffs after, Thursday, on Friday, today. There's still all these games that yet to be played. The seedings could get mixed up a little bit more depending on the results. But right now on Friday, November 15th, the Commanders sit as the last seed in the playoffs. So it's very different circumstances now, right? And, apart from that, apart from waiting to see the other results. The Eagles win their 6th straight game despite another bad start from them. It was an ugly first half from them again. A couple missed field goals, a missed extra point. But really, it all turned around in the second half when their defense really started to make an impact in this game, and they dominated the entire fourth quarter as well. And to that point, Jaden Daniels has been held to 23 rushing yards last night, and also with the Steelers game combined, he's only had 23 rushing yards, which it is not like a huge problem, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on as to why maybe this Commanders defense is sort of in a plateau period right now with this offense. More on that as we get on with the show and into the other segments. But looking at everybody else and how they perform, we mentioned Jaden Daniels, 191 passing yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Brian Robinson added 63 rushing yards, and he scored the first touchdown of the game. Austin Eckler led in receptions and receiving yards with 89, and Zach Ertz followed him with 6 receptions as well. Those two guys were the only guys to record over 2 receptions, and the other receivers only had 2 or just 1 reception the entire game, which, it kind of points out to what we talked about yesterday, the lack of weapons for the Commanders. But we'll get more to that in the next segment. But just to stick on the game last night, Jalen Hurts, he had a pretty solid game, 221 passing yards, and he contributed with a rushing touchdown as well. Saquon, again, he went crazy, 26 carries, 146 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns. And A.J. Brown, also the leading receiver, 5 receptions for 65 yards on the night last night. And those are all the stats, but really how this game sort of broke down. In the first half, it was pretty, it was kind of like just walking in mud, walking in quicksand with these two teams. It was 7 punts, 2 missed field goals, and really into halftime, Washington led 7-3 after the Eagles hit a field goal to get their first points in the first half with about 20 seconds left, which was pretty worrying for the Eagles' point of view, but still a close game considering the Commanders couldn't really do too much with that. And after both teams exchanged field goals, to start the second half there early in the third quarter, the score became 10-6 before the first touchdown of the game was scored, and the Eagles scored their first touchdown to take the lead 12-10 in the third quarter. Then came the big moment in the game, the crucial point of the match where the next 2 drives for each team were huge just because of the fact that I thought it decided the game. The next 2 drives for the Commanders and the next 2 drives for the Eagles were huge in this game here in the second half. Anthony Manzano, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. But yeah, the next 2 drives for each team was huge just because after the Eagles took a 12-10 lead, Washington had the opportunity. They were putting together one of their best drives before a 4th down attempt came. There was a lot of controversy whether or not they should have went for that 4th down or have taken the lead, but of course they went for it, obviously. Jaden Daniels fumbles the snap, and the whole play is just messed up from there. And of course, right after that, Philly fumbles on the next drive, actually, but of course, they go out there and recover their own fumble, which was a missed opportunity, and the Eagles go down and score. Now it's 19-10 with 4 minutes and 58 seconds left, and then already looking a little bit dire, Jaden Daniels goes out there and throws an interception on the first play to Reed Blankenship before Saquon scores again, and then that pretty much wrapped up the entire game at that point. Just the Eagles getting everything to fall in their favor. Anthony, do you feel the Commanders might miss the playoffs because Daniels is a rookie? I'm not saying he's going to be the reason why they miss it. It's just I think that's too much pressure on a rookie. I don't think they'll miss it. Because if they're going to miss it, I got to think of the teams that could replace them, right? Instead, if they were to miss the playoffs, and looking at it right now. I mean, the 49ers are still there, but I think they'd probably replace Green Bay, if anything, or they would replace Arizona. I'd be very surprised if Arizona wins their division, quite honestly. So, if anything, the 49ers would go to 4, and maybe the Cardinals would drop off, because I think it would be a bit harsh if they missed the playoffs because of how good they have shown to play for the majority of the season. So, I don't think they'd be the ones to miss out. I would probably put my money on Arizona to lose the division. San Francisco jumps up from 8 to number 4, and Arizona drops out of the playoffs, and the Commanders would probably sneak in. That's how I would also play it, but to your point, I can't disregard, the Rams, the Seahawks also trying to make a push for it here in the second half of the year. So it is a little bit possible, but I wouldn't think they would miss the playoffs and just drop off like that. The rest of their schedule is pretty favorable, but it is a reality check, certainly, for Washington, because it points to the issue I saw with them. Their offense. Terry McLaurin had 1 reception all game, and so did Noah Brown. This team still needs, weapons for Jaden Daniels. You look at what he had at LSU. I'm not expecting them to go out and get like a Malik Neighbors or a Brian Thomas Jr., but he had those 2 guys that really made his life a lot easier, and he made their lives a lot easier for how good he is. So the Commanders don't really have that just outside of Terry McLaurin. So I think it was a reality check for them. They can't do much now, but they need to, find other ways to go about it and find some more ways to try and win these games, obviously. Anthony, I don't think they miss it, but I just feel that it would be a good learning experience for them to possibly miss the playoffs, because I don't think Daniels is ready for the playoffs right now because he's a rookie, and I feel that he might make a mistake that could cost them in the playoffs. Yeah, I mean, that could all very well happen. At this point, who would they play? They would play the number 2 seed, which right now would be the Eagles, funny enough. So, I have to see how they, evolve from this and, get better from this. The next time they will play them will be in Washington. So, if that one's a closer game, if maybe the Commanders somehow win that one, then I think it'll change. There's still a lot of games left. I think they would make the playoffs, though. And much like the Packers last year, Jordan Love had a great game the first round, then he made a mistake and they lost to the 49ers, right? I think all of that just helps them out, and I'd rather see them go through it than, not make the playoffs at all. I think getting that atmosphere early on in your career, I think only makes it better for your rookie quarterback. So I would go with that, but, overall, just on this game, the Eagles win it. They go to 8-2. One of their best records in the recent 3 years or so for them and Nick Sirianni, so they're definitely rolling heading into the second half of the year. But we're not going to talk too much more about the Eagles. They are what they are. They are proving their worth as of right now. We are going to talk more about the Commanders, though, so we'll be right back after this break. We're going to talk about the Commanders and more, discussing whether or not they have hit a rookie wall, to your point, Anthony, for Jaden Daniels, and can they overcome it for the last couple games that they have here in 2024. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast here on Friday to discuss a little bit more in depth on the Washington Commanders. You know, they lost last night. It was a tough loss yesterday for Washington as, you know, they lose consecutive games for the first time this season. And, you know, it's been a pretty rough couple days, last couple 5 days, because of the fact that, you know, you play a tough physical game against the Steelers. Then, you know, just last night, another tough physical team in the Philadelphia Eagles, especially on the road. It's been a pretty tough week here for Jaden Daniels, the Commanders overall. They get knocked out of the first spot in the division, and now they sit 7th. So, you know, it brings up the question now with Jaden Daniels especially not necessarily playing at that MVP level that you know, some people considered him in, you know, the middle of that run that the Commanders and himself went on. So some people might think that this is the part where, you know, the Commanders and Jaden Daniels sort of hit that plateau or hit like their biggest hurdle where they just can't overcome it, or maybe it takes them too long and they just ran out of time towards the end of the year and they might miss the playoffs or something like that. The rookie wall, as some people might put it, for Jaden Daniels. You know, in your first year of the NFL, you go straight from college, you know, into combine stuff and personal workouts and individual workouts to get ready for the combine and the draft and everything like that. Then right away, just a couple of weeks later, you start preparing for rookie minicamp, and then everything just hits you like a moving train. You just got to get on it, and the first year, it's a whirlwind of everything, and I don't think rookies, especially like Jaden and CJ last year, are given enough credit, you know, for just figuring everything out on the fly and going as far as they have so far. It's really remarkable, you know, that first season, but, you know, it's logical to think at some point there has to be a moment where things aren't going great and you have to get through it, and, you know, it just catches up on you because you don't have that much time off, right, as a rookie, just from the quick transition from everything. So, you know, just watching it has been noticeable, I think, because of the change of pace, I think, of this team recently. I feel like it's not so smooth anymore, or I shouldn't say anymore, but just for the time being, it feels a bit just unorganized, or like they're not all on the same timing. There's some plays where it doesn't seem like they might be on the same page necessarily, just from watching it, right? But still, it's something that they have to figure out now. Where they're still 7-4, it's not like the end of the world, right? They still have a lot to go. But to kind of give a bigger context around this, for the season, Washington has been averaging about 366 yards per game, and over the last 2 games, they've averaged about 253, about 100 drop-off there, give or take. Over the last 2 games also, they've had a 30% third down completion percentage as well. Not very good, obviously, stalling a lot of their offensive drives and making it hard for them to build any sort of momentum if you're not converting on third downs. Also, they're averaging about 4.1 yards per play now, and we mentioned Jaden Daniels having the 23 rushing yards over the last 2 games. Definitely his season low so far in his first year, and over the last 2 games, Jaden Daniels specifically has been completing about 59% of his passes, 393 total yards between both games, and 1 touchdown and 1 interception as well. So, I mean, it's, again, he's a rookie, right? It's weird because we put him already in some MVP considerations, which is crazy, but these are, you know, kind of rookie numbers, if we're being honest, right? Around 59% completion percentage, 393 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. It's not to the level of struggles that maybe Caleb's going through, but these are the struggles that young players go through at some point, you know, early in their careers. And this Commanders team also, a lot of people point to the fact that they're 0-3 against teams that are over 500, which really puts into question the legitimacy of this team, right? If every time they've played a playoff caliber team they lose, how much are, you know, they considered a legit team? If they can't beat another good team, are they even really good, or do they just beat up on bad teams, right? Those are all logical things to bring up, and I understand all of that, but also from just watching as well, like I mentioned before, it looks like Jaden also, it might just be me, it feels like he's playing with heavy legs, going back to the fact that, he just might be fatigued, obviously, from the limited time off, but he just looks like his legs are a little bit heavier. The rib injuries could be something that is still affecting him. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? It's obviously a struggle to go through. The longest season also of his playing career is something that you have to adjust to. But overall, we brought it up yesterday how I think they definitely need more weapons, and we just brought it up in the last segment too. Terry McLaurin has 1 reception, Noah Brown has 1 reception, and most of the receptions last night, if it wasn't a running play, it went to Zach Ertz or it went to a dump-off to Austin Eckler or Brian Robinson. Honestly, a miracle that they were able to stay in this game for that long, pretty much into the third quarter, because it was quite literally all the plays were going just short little dump-offs to Eckler or Zach Ertz or Brian Robinson. And, it was working, but at some point, these great teams, these great all-star built teams are it's going to catch up to you, and the talent is just overwhelming, especially when you got a guy like Saquon just waiting back there, and Terry was blanketed all night. Noah Brown really didn't contribute much, and it goes back to the lack of rushing, I think, production that we've seen from Jaden Daniels, because if already Terry's taken out of the game, Noah's taken out of the game, all you're doing is dumping it off. Your running game is solid, but you can't just do one thing. Where we critique teams for being one-dimensional in the passing game, you can't just be one-dimensional running the ball either, right? You have to mix it up and show some variety. And with the fact that they're running the ball pretty effectively, you still take away Jaden's running ability, and now you're without that as well. Without Terry, without Noah, and without Jaden Daniels' running ability, you are quite literally just down to your running game. And it's not enough, honestly, against these great defenses, these great offenses, to try and keep up with them in these games where the stakes are at an all-time high, obviously, as we get closer to the playoffs. And, does this mean the Commanders are done? Is it unrealistic for them to kind of claw their way back and get over this? I don't think so. I still have belief in the Commanders. I like what they're doing. I like Dan Quinn as a candidate for Coach of the Year, and things like that. And he's done a remarkable job. And there's no comparison with either roster. I think by far the Eagles have a better roster, but still the Commanders, with a little bit of luck, the missed field goals and things like that, they were able to hang around, and I think that has a lot of merit in the job that they're doing. So I think they can come back and still compete for that division title. If you remember last year, it was around week 11 where the Eagles came in as the heavy favorites to win the NFC East based on the season that they were having, and right around this time and going forward was when they fell apart, essentially. Now, I don't think that'll happen again with Saquon Barkley there, but they've already had their bye week. They had an early bye week this year, so you don't want to think anyone's going to get hurt, but there's no more rest time essentially going forward, so they're going to have a lot of football just continuously here, and then they have to ramp it up in the playoffs, which isn't an easy thing to do. So that's why I don't really like the early buys. I'd much rather my team have middle of the year or late in the year buys like the Commanders do, which is another reason why I am feeling a little bit more confident that they can resort all these issues going forward. And also, if you look at the schedules, now that I bring up the bye week, the Eagles have a much tougher schedule to go through to get their hands on the division title compared to Washington, because the Eagles still have to play just next week, probably their 2 hardest games of 2024 are the next 2 weeks, at Los Angeles, the Rams, and at Baltimore over the next 2 weeks. For the Eagles, then they're at home against the Panthers. They're at home against the Steelers, which is probably not going to be an easy game. Then they play Washington again before they close it out against the Cowboys and the Giants, which they should win those games, obviously. But, that run there, just short term, the Rams, the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Panthers, and the Commanders all in this span of the next 5 games. All those games are tough except the Panthers game. So it's a lot tougher than what the Commanders have to deal with obviously playing Dallas next, then the Titans next, both of those games at home. Then they're on their bye week. Then they travel to New Orleans. Then they play the Eagles at home, like we mentioned. Then they finish it off at home against the Falcons and away at Dallas, right? They only have the Eagles as their toughest game and the Falcons also. But it's definitely manageable, and I'm pretty sure they're favorites in all these games except the Eagles game. So it's still there for them. I think they could get around 11 wins, honestly. They're at 7 right now, and they're going to beat the Cowboys twice. They should beat the Saints, and they should beat the Titans. So those are the 4 wins right there that they need to get 11 wins. And then the game, obviously, with Philadelphia is going to be huge. So it is undoubtedly a rough moment right now, but I'm still holding faith in this team. I think they are talented enough, and I think Jaden will start to pick it up once again. But it'll certainly be on Cliff Kingsbury as well to help the young quarterback out, not just put it all on his shoulders, because again, he is a rookie. He will need help. It will be up to the organization as well to come together and put together a better plan going forward for this team. But they're not dead by any means necessary. Don't count them out just yet. But on that topic there of talking about the schedules a little bit more, we're going to get to part 2 of our weekly game picks here in just a few seconds. We're going to go through the 6 games remaining from the Sunday slate and just give you guys my predictions and why I think each of these teams is going to win on Sunday. So don't go anywhere. We have a lot more to talk about on today's show.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Now jumping back into the action here to go over to part 2 of our weekly game picks. Obviously here in week 11, we already have a winner to start week 11, the Eagles defeating the Commanders just last night. So we're going to get through more of the Sunday games. We went through about half of them yesterday, and now on today's show, we're going to get to a couple more here just to see where we stand on these upcoming games, right? Because it will certainly be something to watch as I get it up here for you guys in just a second. There we go. These are the games that we have on here for the remainder of week 11 on Sunday, the games that we didn't get to. Starting off in the top left-hand corner, the Vikings taking on the Tennessee Titans. The Vikings are trying to get on track here with their offense. You know, the Titans, it is a good week to do it because the Titans, realistically, it's hard for them to really put anything together where it's going to be much different for the remainder of the year. So, you know, they've lost the last 4 of their last 5 games, and Minnesota needs to get back to being efficient on offense because the last 2 games haven't been really up to standard, honestly, for them. They've stalled a lot. They've turned the ball over a ton, or more than really the solid team should. And a lot of it, you know, will fall on the shoulders of Sam Darnold, obviously, as the quarterback. So they got to figure that out. And although Tennessee's defense is solid, I still think Minnesota should not really have too much of a problem to go out there and have a better performance than what we saw against the Colts, you know, specifically in the first half, and the Jacksonville Jaguars, where that game was too close for where each of those two teams are in 2024. It shouldn't have been that close. So I'm really looking for the Vikings to go out there and have one of those complete games, kind of like the Packers game without, obviously, the second half comeback, kind of. So one of those games, at least from the offense, where they put up a good amount of points, they start fast again, and then manage it from there. It's funny about these two teams because Minnesota has one of the worst passing defenses, saying all of that, but Tennessee is not really too suited to combat that because they're second to last in the NFL in terms of passing offense. So it's not an area where they necessarily will take advantage of because they haven't been great themselves. So, yeah, I think if you couldn't tell, obviously I'm going with the Vikings because I think their defense will cause the Titans problems. I think Will Levis will turn the ball over, and it should help them. But really, I'm looking at the offense to come alive again for the Vikings. And moving on to the next game here, we have the Raiders traveling to Miami to take on the Dolphins, obviously. And they have similar records, with the Vikings coming in at 2-4 on a 5-game losing streak, though, while Miami just snapped their 3-game losing streak, and they won a big game over the Rams just last week, and they sit at 3-6. Similar records, but very different sensations that we're getting from both of these two teams. And, Miami's defense, I can't say enough about them and how well they played and just how awesome, their performance was to shut down the Rams offense and, get the pressure on Matthew Stafford, make him uncomfortable all night, not really let Kyren Williams get going. And even though they might have given up some yards at certain points of the games, they didn't allow a touchdown in that game either. So I thought that was a great performance from obviously their players, but their defensive coordinator, Anthony Weaver, for coming up with an amazing game plan in this matchup against the Rams. And now with the Raiders coming into town, they're going to start Gardner Minshew again, which he's had some turnover problems, so it should play more into the Dolphins' favor as well. And the Raiders' defense also has allowed the third most points on average per game in the NFL so far, and their offense is one of the worst in the NFL in terms of running the ball, or they're actually the worst team in the NFL when it comes to running the ball. So those two things don't really mix. If you can't really run the ball, it means you're coming off of the field too quickly. Your offense isn't on the field long enough to give that defense a rest, and then once they're tired, the game starts to get away from you a little bit. So with all the track speed that the Dolphins have and how much the Raiders are probably going to be running on defense, even more than usual, I don't think it's a good recipe for the Raiders. So I'm going to go with the Dolphins here. I think their defense is just going to build on it, and Gardner Minshew may struggle yet again in this game with the Raiders. So now we move on to the third game, and this one's a bit more of a challenge to decide both of these teams, one, are coming off of pretty bad losses. The Broncos must be feeling pretty sick about losing to the Chiefs and potentially giving them their first loss, and the way that they lost that game was pretty disheartening, if I'm being honest. They should have won that game. But, I guess the moral victory for some people was the fact that they were close. If you accept moral victories, I'm sure the Broncos don't and Sean Payton doesn't. But, it is what it is now. And, talking about bad losses, the Falcons just lost to the Saints for a couple of their own mistakes. But, the Saints also had to do a lot to even win by 3 points. So it's two teams that I think are better than the record might say. Definitely the Falcons on offense, but their defense is a little bit hit or miss. And the Broncos, same thing. They're on the other side, though. Their defense is very good, but their offense is also a bit hit or miss with a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix. But, the Falcons will face the Broncos, obviously. One of the best defenses in the NFL, just allowing 17.7 points per game. Fantastic for them. Even though the Broncos offense is a little bit hit or miss, still, it has looked better. It's growing along with Bo Nix as well as we go through the season. So that's great to see. And it'll really come down to Atlanta's defense. Can they play better? Can they outplay a growing, improving Broncos offense? They're in direct competition with one another, right? The Falcons are going to quite literally have to stop the Broncos offense. The Falcons defense has to step up, and those two parts of the ball are the most questionable for these teams, and they're in direct competition with one another. So that'll be really the determining point in this game. And to that point, I think Atlanta just has enough to edge out the Broncos here. I think Pat Surtain is going to be probably all over Drake London. Pause. He's gonna be blanketing him pretty much the entire game. So with that being the case, though, don't sleep on Darnell Mooney. I've been sleeping on him, but he has really stepped up over the last couple weeks. So he's been doing great. I think he's going to step up again and have a great performance, and the Falcons will just edge out here the Broncos in Week 11. Then we move on to the other side of the picture here. We have a divisional game, the second game between the Seahawks and the 49ers this year. Seahawks coming off of their bye week, trying to get things clicking once again after hitting a rough spot before their bye week, and the 49ers come into this game a week after Christian McCaffrey finally makes his season debut down in Tampa, and this will be the first home game that Christian McCaffrey will play in. And it's a huge thing because in his return, we mentioned how not only was it just significant just having him out there, but for Brock Purdy, I think it gives him such an easier read to make out there on a crucial third down or on a crucial point in the game where they've stalled a little bit. Just looking out for McCaffrey as an outlet in the passing game or the running game, I think is huge for Brock, especially not having Brandon Ayuk, obviously, and maybe Juwan and Debo or Kittle aren't necessarily, getting open as frequently. It's always easier to find Christian McCaffrey. So I think that's going to be a huge help for them. And if you guys remember in the first matchup, it was pretty high scoring, and the Seahawks had a chance, but there was some crucial turnovers that they made and crucial, bad decisions that hurt them in this game. So I think now, and even just going forward, I want to see the Seahawks, get away from that and be a lot safer with the football. But I think, Christian McCaffrey, his home debut this year, everyone's going to go crazy, wanting to see him score, wanting to see him do great. So I think it's too good to go against the 49ers. They're looking a little bit more like the 49ers. Ricky Pearsall had a nice game. Juwan Jennings is growing into a great player. So I'm going to go with the 49ers here. I think they start to figure things out, starting with the Seahawks. Then, arguably, the biggest game other than probably Pittsburgh and Baltimore, the Chiefs travel to Buffalo to take on the Buffalo Bills. The first overall seed could be wrapped up with how this game turns out, and I'm being serious, because the Chiefs, after this, they don't have too many hard games. Honestly, I think the only really tough one is probably Pittsburgh and Houston, but both of those teams don't really fill me with the utmost confidence that they're going to just defeat the Chiefs just based on what we've seen from them. So in this game, it's going to be huge because Buffalo at home, I think they play better, and they're also coming off of, a little win streak here, but they are dealing with some injuries. Keon Coleman's already out. Dalton Kincaid, he didn't practice the last 2 days, so I'm not quite sure how much we will see of him or if he is going to be ruled out for Sunday. But they do expect Amari Cooper to come back, which is obviously huge at this point considering the other two. And, a win for Kansas City would put them 3 games ahead of Buffalo and Baltimore, who I think a lot of people have as the next best team, with 2 head-to-head victories over both of those 2 teams. So that's why, it sort of re-emphasizes why I think the first overall seed will be wrapped up, because those 2 teams are probably the closest ones, and, the 2 tiebreakers go in favor of the Chiefs. So the Bills really need this win if they want to have any hope of getting the number 1 seed and that bye week. It's going to be huge. But another piece of news for the Chiefs is that their kicker, Harrison Butker, was placed on the IR. He is going to need knee surgery. I think it's an MCL injury, if I'm not mistaken. And, a kicker, you might be thinking, who cares? But Harrison Butker, has been huge for them over the last few weeks in these tight games. You need a reliable guy like that. So it could affect some of the some of the decisions potentially on fourth down or a long field goal, maybe missing a couple if the backup just doesn't have it. Obviously, compared to Harrison Butker, it's not going to be the same. So that's something else to look out for. But I want to say the Bills. I think the Bills are capable, of being a good team, and with Josh Allen, anything's possible, right? But I can't bet against Patrick until I see somebody beat him. You know what I mean? It's like I've seen, and I bet against Patrick too. I have been in favor of the other teams, thinking that this is their chance to win. But of course, Patrick Mahomes does always pull something out of where, and just they win games. They know how to win games. That's all they care about is winning games. They don't care how they do it, how it looks. Do you agree with it? It doesn't matter to them. And I think the Bills are a good team. I would like to see them win just to make it a little bit more interesting, but I think it's going to be Kansas City. Until I see someone beat them, and I guess convincingly, I'm not going to bet against them. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs here. And the last game on Sunday Night Football, we have the Bengals and the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers, with the top-ranked defense in the NFL, is facing their greatest challenge with a top-ranked offense in the Cincinnati Bengals, with Joe Burrow playing at an MVP level. Jamar Chase on the verge, kind of flirting with the Triple Crown, if you will. So this will definitely be their biggest challenge. And, I think Los Angeles is a good team. I think they will make the playoffs. But, their schedule hasn't been too challenging in the minds of a lot of people, and for me as well, because the toughest teams they've played have been Pittsburgh, Arizona, and Kansas City, and they've lost to all of them. And also the Broncos, I guess you could throw in there as a decent team, but they did beat them. But overall, they've lost to more of the good teams than have beaten them. And I'm not saying the Bengals are in that group because of their record, obviously. I don't care how good their offense is playing or how good Joe Burrow's playing. If their record is what it is, it's a whole team thing. The team itself isn't that good. So, it's definitely going to be their biggest test. They're at home, so they should be a little bit more favored. But it is huge just because both of these two teams are competing for a final playoff spot. So it'll be, a win would mean that it helps your case out a lot more, but also directly affects negatively the other team that's trying to sneak into the playoffs. So this game is huge, but